Thank you guys for having me. We're going to talk a little bit of cybersecurity today. So we're going to try to do it a little bit differently because, one of the big things about digital transformation is that cybersecurity is probably going to be one of the things that pushes us to rapidly change, whether we like it or not. So it's probably a good idea to get some of those concepts out of the way now and to understand why cybersecurity is important and also some of the reasons that are holding us back. So what we're going to do here is we're going to play or have a little game that I call Cybersecurity Mythbusters Edition. This comes from a lot of the topics and a lot of the things that we've heard from clients that are holding them back from really embracing the fact that cybersecurity is probably coming at them faster than they think, and the requirements of their industries that are going to be start pushing forward or really forcing them to change their ways or fall behind their competitors or not even be considered in the marketplace if they don't have certain standards met. So we're going to go through some common themes that we hear when people talk about why they're really not looking into cybersecurity or why they're really not taking it to heart. So the first myth that we hear all the time is we're small. Nobody really wants our data. I got nothing to hide. And so we hear that all the time. And basically what I want people to know is that the target right now of cybersecurity, of the people that are hacking into our businesses, and they're not looking at the big guys anymore. The big guys are starting to work on that. So they're looking at the small businesses. So really 55% of small businesses have experienced some type of data breach or cyber attack. And small and medium-sized manufacturers, they're really being specifically targeted, not just manufacturers, but every kind of small to medium-sized businesses are being specifically targeted for their general lack of security. Most of the spear phishing, and if you don't know what spear phishing is, those are targeted attacks. So a phishing attack is that email that they put out to everybody and they hope that somebody responds. But a spear phishing attack is something that they put out directly to the CEOs of organizations and the CFOs, and a lot of those are actually targeted right at the SMB market. So and a study from NIST and a presentation that we were recently in saying that about 70% of the SMB market are not really prepared to handle a cyber breach or cyber attack. So really that's one of those myths. I mean, so to kind of explain that, this is a picture of Fort Knox, and there's a lot of return, billions of dollars worth of money in there. But what comes along with Fort Knox is multiple layers of defense, motion cameras and video cameras and security professionals all sitting there watching that. So a huge return, kind of like, but the big companies, and it's kind of like those big companies, they're hardening up their stuff. Whereas, what your small business, you're looking at something like my business, they have simple locks, simple passwords, many windows. Which would you go to attack? Which one would you try to do? None of the people who are trying to do these attacks, they're looking into the easier, not hardened targets. And then secondarily, on top of that, there's millions of those hardened targets. So yeah, there's lots of billions of dollars inside something like a Fort Knox or inside a Boeing or inside a company like that. But there's millions and billions of dollars if you can get lots of these unhardened houses or your businesses, for example, that just don't seem to have, they're not up to standards yet. So that's why they're looking at everybody that's an SMB. It's because generally lacks and lots of targets. So myth two we get all the time is like, we're backed up. I mean, that's good enough. I don't need to really do much more. If something happens, I'll be able to go to my backup and we'll be able to recover. So just so you know, most SMBs never test the integrity, the ability to, the integrity or the recoverability of their backups until they have an instance. And, they say that about 7 to 10% of all backups will fail, although I'll tell you that on our side, self-implemented backups that users, either our clients or the clients that we pick up after they've had a problem, their failure rate when not being monitored by somebody in their office or a professional is somewhere upwards of 50%. We've seen that happen way too often, that they're just either not successful or not successful to the rate that they're supposed to be. Your backups should be encrypted, and the types of backups kind of matter. You really got to understand what type of backup you're doing. Are you doing an off-site? You're doing a file replicated server. There's a difference between disaster recovery and business continuity, so you really should start to educate yourself on what those are. That disaster recovery model says, yeah, we have a big problem and I recover, and a business continuity says, I can't be down for much more than 15 minutes. I got to keep my business up and running all the time. So we got to go that. So, you know, this is a kind of funny picture. This is actually very similar to a client that I walked into, and they were doing all their backups on, in this case, it was hard drives and not disks and stuff, but they were still backing up and making copies to regular hard drives on their computers, and if the building went kaboom, all the stuff would be gone. So it's just a little funny picture to let us know that the hackers have changed, and it's time for us to change a little bit too. So one of the myths 3 that we see all the time is that we have an antivirus, and that's good enough. So, but just so you know that 33% of all the respondents that had experienced a ransomware attack in the past, well, they all had antivirus too, and they had antivirus and it didn't work. And 53% of those organizations had multiple solutions in place. So the traditional antivirus software that protect against the standard ransomware, they don't really protect against the ransomwares, and a lot of the free and unmanaged softwares that we see on clients, that's not good enough. So there's new products coming out there called endpoint detection and response, and those new products are really looking at not just whether or not this software that's running looks like a virus or has a virus signature, but actually looking at the computer itself and whether or not it's sending out data that it normally wouldn't send out, and it actually can quarantine those machines from the rest of the network before they can infect other people. So there's these new type of antivirus solutions, they're called EDRs, that really are looking to work with the entirety of the computer and not just whether or not some signature that some other company had found, you know, or some virus that you know, doesn't work 0 day, because a virus checker usually has to go and say, well, somebody else got a virus. Now I know it's a virus. Hopefully I don't get it. These things are actually looking for a more intelligent response to that and trying to find information. So the modern suite is the modern security suite is kind of like the Avengers. There's no one person that could tackle, you know, the big villain that's out there, but all as a group, you need to put all of these things together, and that's what the modern security suites are offering, much more than just a single antivirus or somebody who's just pretending to be that home version. So myth number 4, cyber attacks only come from external actors. To be honest with you, the largest cybersecurity threats come from inside your company. Whether they're malicious or not, those cybersecurity threats are usually happening from inside your organization. A CFO or a secretary that's sending out doesn't really, you know, she's getting a phishing email from who she believes is the CFO, and she's sending credentials out, or she's, you know, or she's not trained to not send that wire out. 60% of all attacks were insiders. 3 out of 4 of those were actually malicious. Some of them were inadvertent, but so that's the people who are actually stealing data from you. They're stealing data, or they got upset because they think you're going to fire them, or they're not happy with something you did, and they're actually causing some malicious intent out on your network. That's a pretty staggering number if you think about it. So, and of that, more than 1/3 of all the employees that responded received little or no cybersecurity training, and only 17% said that they received a lot. So we're really not training our employees to help us out and be a part of our security solution. So, and don't forget your vendors, because a lot of us give access to our vendors have, you know, their own vulnerabilities, or we give access to the vendors. This could be your accountant that comes in with their own laptop, or other people that come into your network. So we got to think about them too. So the truth is that this is the way that hacking is portrayed in the movies. You know, we're going to overclock some Unix system, and you know, and I'm going to take my phone, I'm going to hack into this. But the truth is that it really happens like this. It's some guy who just pretends to be, you know, your IT provider, and he pretends that he's from a company like TechWorks and says, hey, you know, I'm helping you out, and your employees really usually just give that information up, and it happens on a regular basis. So myth number 5, Windows desktops are the only devices that get hacked, and you know, we're safe because we use Apple products, or we just use the cloud or some other stuff like that. So the truth is that IoT IoT devices are actually being hacked now, and so that's your TVs that you're putting on your network, and printers, and all of these Alexas and everything else. So those devices that normally a TV in your building wouldn't be considered something that's getting hacked, but I'll tell you that I got a $39 check back from not ViewSonic, Vizio, because they were spying on us, and our TV was being used to spy on us, and there was a class action lawsuit. So these devices have to be taken seriously, and we can't just throw up every new TV or printer or wireless device or all these different kind of IO devices. We have to kind of look at that. And just like desktops, any ordinary device that's connected to the internet is hack prone. And there is a new world of all these internet devices in our smart homes, and they're all vulnerable. So to give you an idea of that, the most vulnerable product right now on the market is actually your Google Android. The phone and other devices that run the Android operating system, tablets and things like that, are actually what's being hacked the most. But we've seen a rise in everything, and to understand the Linux kernel, this is what runs most IoT devices on the network, and it's coming, and it's been growing. So we got to be careful about everything that we put on our network now, and we got to come up with strategies to keep that. So I've gotten told that I have insurance, and if something happens, we're going to be covered by it. So the truth is that most business insurance policies don't cover cyber incidents, and the average cost of at least. Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Kevin. Sorry for interruption. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right, I'll run through it quick. We're almost there. 38%, $38,000 average cost to SMBs to overcome a data breach, and that's not including business loss and business liability. That's really just paying the ransomwares and paying somebody to help fix it. So the other costs aren't really taken into account. The business impact costs aren't really taken into account. 60% of businesses really severely impact, and cyber insurance is probably currently the best deal on the industry. You can get about $250,000 for $1,500 a year. You can get $1 million for usually somewhere, depending on the size of your organization, somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. And I just put this out there so that we understand that there's a big difference between what a cyber liability covers, hacking and phishing and all those kinds, and your regular kind of liabilities and other policies out there. You don't get this stuff with your regular E&O policies and regular stuff, so you really should be looking at that. So one of the other things is that we've passed other compliances because we have things like HIPAA or PCI or DFARS if you're manufacturing, or DFS if you're in New York and you're a financial service company. But what we found is that complying with these standards, what they're really doing is putting in policies that never actually get done. And these are excellent frameworks for protecting businesses, but they really need to be much bigger. That every industry, they're facing these new maturities and standards certifications. So you got to know what your standards are for your industry, because if you're not meeting those standards, people might not do business with you. It's happening in the manufacturing industry. If you do if you manufacture with the Department of Defense, they won't do business with you in the future unless you meet the new NIST standards and you're certified in those standards. So a lot of companies we see, they said, oh yeah, well I put in my HIPAA thing, I went through these policies, but they're really not truly implemented right, and you have to have that. So, and cybersecurity is kind of a whole multitude of things. It's just a small piece that say I'm doing the cybersecurity part, but all of these kind of things go together. It's a multi-dimensional strategy that you kind of got to check off all of these things to run a business that's really cyber secure. So, myth number 9 is it's too expensive. Yeah, when it is expensive, but when you think of IT security and its expense, if you $0 budget for it, it can definitely see that way. But if you don't do it, the damage and the loss to your reputation, lawsuits, and intellectual property can be huge. And depending on the industry, there's actually some grants and R&D credits that are out there for businesses to bolster their. So you should be looking at your industry and see if there's any kind of credits or grants out there. And actually done right, we found that there's a return on investment when you set these policies up efficiently. They actually make businesses the processes of businesses a little bit more efficient. So you really should see some return on investment if you're doing it correctly. So it's just a funny picture. It's like this is what we feel some of our clients are trying to do with their security, just trying to do it the wrong way and get away with it. So So one of the last myths that I have is that the government will keep us safe, and although the government is terrific at cyber warfare, it cannot protect our businesses, and they really don't even pay attention to cyber breaches below $1 million. Many of those state and rogue actors are using our lack of security and policies against us. They're targeting small businesses and small firms in order to take advantage of us and breach our country as a whole in some cases. And it's really a part, I think it's our responsibility as businesses to start taking some of this seriously, because if we don't, you'll see what some of the ramifications are. And what I'm showing you with my last slide here is that what you're seeing up here is the U.S. Military's plane that was a secret plane that they were putting out, and what China was able to piece together by stealing blueprints from small manufacturers in the U.S. They were able to piece these two planes together. So these two planes up here are the U.S. models, and these two planes are the Chinese models of those planes that they were able to get from stealing data from very small manufacturers that had each one of them having pieces of the blueprint. So I think it's our responsibility to start taking some of this stuff seriously. So that's it for me.